So I got this £10 wig from Watson Wigs and I'm going to transform it.
Yeah. I'm already laughing. I know exactly what I'm going to look like. I can't even give it up.
You know the little lady from The Incredibles?
No capes. Yeah, the no capes woman. It's like... I look like Sia.
So I'm now going to show you just roughly what I'm doing to the wig. This is a synthetic wig. It can take low heat, but I want to ramp the heat up and actually almost kind of singe the hair a little bit. We don't want to completely damage it. We need it to lose its shine and we want it to look more textured. As it's synthetic and it overheats, it starts to stretch and then it becomes more pliable. So once I've heated up each tiny section that I'm curling, I hold on to a few of the strands of the hair and allow the rest of the hair to fall to the crown. And then I leave it in a heat and allow it to cool in that shape. Because we are borderline singeing that hair, it's creating lots and lots of texture and it's going to enable us to kind of manipulate the hair into a shape rather than it being silky smooth like this and not being able to do much with it. Once you've worked your way around the whole head, you should have something that looks like a bit of a bird's nest. And then we're going to cut into that to take away a lot of the bulk. We just want long strands coming out at the end and some volume in the middle to keep the hair upright. So moving on to the makeup, I'm going to take Witch Hazel. This is a natural astringent. This is going to remove any oils from the skin ready for the makeup. I'm then going to go in with some FX wax and flatten Jack's eyebrows, and I've done this in many tutorials, so I've skipped over the process, but I will link some in the description bar for you. The next product I'm using is called Dermaflage. If you've already seen my White Walker tutorial, then you'll be familiar with this product. If you're not familiar with it, it is a silicone-based topical filler and it's designed to conceal scars and recesses on the skin, but it's also great for special effects makeup. As you'll already know, Edward Scissorhands has scars on his face from his scissor hands, and these are areas that he's nipped his face with the blades. So we're going to create those scars using this topical filler. So I'm just following some reference images that I've got on my phone of Edward Scissorhands so I can place the scars on the same areas on Jack's face. One thing you will find with the Dermaflage is that as the two products come out and they combine into one, they do set in the tube, so you'll need to keep changing the nozzle so that the silicone flows freely. Now, as this is quite an old film, the scars themselves are quite prominent. They look like they're actually sat on the skin. The artist in me would like to blend out the edges and make it look a bit more realistic. There are some scars that would be a lot thicker and ropey, but most of these are identical in terms of their thickness and the fact that you can see where they start and finish. When you're not resting your arm on a table, you can get a few wibbly wobbly lines, so I'm just using my spatula to subtly even out the lines, but again, there's just no need to be too perfect about it. If you've never worked with silicone before, it does go off pretty quickly, so you'll find that if you're using your spatula and you're not quick enough and it goes off, you can pull it back off of the skin. So just do your work very quickly and then get out and leave it to set. You can use Elmer's glue to create the scars, you can use FX wax, you can even roll thin plier tissue into little sausages dipped in a small amount of flour and water, which will act as a glue, and then you can smooth that onto the skin and you'll get a similar effect. Although it's not as great, it is definitely a cheaper, more affordable option and it will still work really well. As I've waxed down Jack's brows, I'm able to take the silicone straight over it and I've not got to worry about it getting stuck to the hair or the hair affecting the shape of the wax. As we've sealed the brows down, we've got a hard surface for the silicone to go straight over. For the complexion, I'm going to use the Too Faced Born This Way concealer. I've chosen this because it has really good coverage, but you can use any foundation. We're not going for a white base, we're going for a very pale base. And I'm working that onto the skin and over the scars using a duo fibre brush because this does shear down the product. So although I want the coverage, I still don't want it to be full coverage. This way it leaves behind the pigment, but it doesn't look like it's cakey on the skin. I mixed together the shades Snow and Almond, and as you can see, it's a really good colour for the Edward Scissorhands look. What I like about this particular product is the staying power. It's really, really good. So if this is a look you'd like to cosplay as and you need to wear it for hours, this would be a really good product for longevity. So again, another reason I chose this product is because of the coverage and the pigment in the product. So it's a great way to cover the eyebrows. So for this eyebrow, I've gone straight in with the concealer and that works perfectly well. But if you don't have a full coverage, I'm going to show you how to conceal it with a little bit of orange as your base. During Halloween you can get grease paints at Asda, you can get it at Walmart, you can get it anywhere that's cheap. So a orange grease paint for a pumpkin, for instance, would be the first product you lay down, and this is just going to knock back the darkness of your eyebrows, and then you're going to powder over it. Any plain finely milled translucent powder is ideal, and use a sponge to really press that in. And then you can just layer your foundation over the top of that to disguise your eyebrows. I'm now going in with a cream foundation over the top. Again, this does have better coverage than a liquid foundation. But for every layer that you do, you just need to powder in between. Each time you powder, this is going to help to knock back a little bit more colour, and then you just layer again with your foundation. So now I've concealed Jack's eyebrows, I'm going in with a small amount more of the concealer, and I'm just placing this over the high points of the face. This will help to make those areas stand out a little bit more, which is great because we're going to add some contour, so then we get a really nice definition of contour and highlight. Once you've done that, you then want to apply one final powder to the eyebrows just to make sure they're nicely sealed in place, and as you can see, this does make them look more invisible. I'm going to take a cool tone brown. This one is a bronzer by Benefit, but any cool tone brown would be great, and we're going to use this to contour around Jack's face. Although Edward Scissorhands isn't extremely skinny, he just looks quite ill and a bit gaunt, so we want to create a bit more of a chiselled appearance. Jack does have a very chiselled look to his face anyway, but we've knocked back a lot of the shadows with the pale foundation concealer, so we want to add those shadows back in but make them a little bit more defined and prominent, so we're not going to blend them out too much. I first went in with a smaller brush, and now I'm going in with a slightly bigger brush. This is just going to help diffuse the colour. We don't want to blend it out too much because we want to keep it in the areas that we've applied it, but we do want to soften it slightly, so I'm going back in with my foundation brush, working that directly over the area that we've applied it, just to soften the edges. This is what's going to give us more of a shadowed appearance rather than it looking like we've just applied a heavy contour. Again, it still does need to be quite defined, but you do want a soft appearance to the edges. Now, Edward does have a bit of a sad appearance to his face, and there's a slight puffiness just above his chin on either side of his mouth, and that kind of gives him that sad, almost pouty appearance. So I'm just creating that with a bit of shadow. So I apply the brown shade with one brush, and then go in with a brush that's been dipped into a small amount of foundation but worked all the excess off onto the back of my hand, and then use that just to gently feather over the brown to soften it. Taking the same Born This Way concealer, but only in the shade Snow this time, which is the lighter shade, I'm just working that down the sides of Jack's nose to make it look a little bit wider. Going back to the brown contour shade, I'm working that around Jack's eye sockets, taking the colour down quite far because we want this to all look quite sunken and generally very sallow and like he's not had a sleep in years. Using a fluffier brush, I'm taking the same brown into the hollows of Jack's eyes on the top half of his lid, and I'm also going to be working that onto the actual brow itself. If you think of it as a diamond shape, this is kind of the pattern that we're going to be creating with the brown around the eyes. Obviously you want to keep it quite soft, but we're going to be extending the brown up slightly and then obviously below the eyes, and this just creates a very sad appearance to the face. Going into my Certified Tropical Wonders palette, I'm taking the white shade. This is a matte white eyeshadow, and I'm using a pencil brush to redefine Jack's eyelid shape. We just want to enhance this shape so it's more visible when his eyes open. Next I'm taking the shade Mocha by Makeup Geek. This is a matte medium brown colour. Using a pointed pencil brush by MAC, I'm going along the seam of that white eyeshadow just underneath the brow and creating a darker shadow. Shading the eye socket in this area just makes that white area look a lot more defined, so we've got more of a prominent eyelid. Then I'm taking the same brown eyeshadow on a fluffy blending brush, tapping all the excess powder off, and I'm just going around the eye socket and down the sides of the nose, making sure Jack's bridge of his nose looks a little bit wider. I'm then taking the white eyeshadow directly underneath Jack's bottom eyelid, and again this just makes that area look a little bit more visible. Going back into my Tropical Wonders palette, I'm taking a small amount of the matte black eyeshadow mixed with a little bit of the matte brown Mocha eyeshadow, and I'm deepening that shadow further. It's always better to apply your lighter shades first and then go in and start to deepen. If you're going with the darker shades too soon, then you could make it too dark and then you won't be able to take away that darkness. Here I'm using the very pointy tip of that brush to go along the seam of the white eyeshadow underneath those lower eyelashes. This makes the white area underneath those lower lashes look more puffy, and that's what we want. We want a more defined lid on both the top and bottom. For the lips, I'm taking the Bare Minerals Bare Pro lipstick in the shade Raisin, and I'm making sure that when I apply this, I don't take it to the very outer corners of Jack's lips. Edward Scissorhands has a very pouty looking mouth, so just make sure that you fill in the very centre of the lips, and I'm just placing that also on either side of the scars on his lower lips, but I'm making sure that I don't take it to the outer edge. And then I'm using a brush with a very small amount of the concealer that we've used over the entire face to buff over that so it doesn't look like it's lipstick, but rather that's just his natural lip colour. I'm going in with a small lip brush dipped into a small amount of the brown mocha shade, and I'm just placing this on some of the scars on one side just to create a bit of a shadow. This will give the scars more depth and make them appear like they're actually sitting on the skin. Much like the foundation does to the face, it just gives it kind of a flat appearance and you lose those shadows. So we're just going back in and putting those where we need them. I'm also placing a very small amount of white highlight to the tops of the scars. Again, this helps with that three-dimensional appearance. So I'm now just doing some finishing touches, taking the concealer down the rest of the neck and deepening the eye sockets before Jack puts in some black contact lenses. Because Jack's got quite blue eyes, the brown contact lenses don't really do much, they actually give more of a green appearance, so we're going with black lenses as this looks more effective on Jack's eyes. And that completes the transformation. Look how incredible the scissor hands are that Jack actually made. And I'm really pleased with how the wig turned out, considering I had no idea what I was going to do with it. I literally bought it that morning.